All right. As it stands right now, the Supreme Court just handed Donald Trump a important win for birthright citizenship. So let's go ahead and play this video.
Happened to Donald Trump, multiples of that. And now, finally, this case has made its way up to the Supreme Court. And so we're going to go through this case as quickly as we can. It looks like, at first glimpse, and we're just starting, it looks like the court has put some limits on the ability of district courts, trial courts, to issue those kind of rulings. And it looks like the court has said district courts only have the power to do that in certain very narrow circumstances. So we're going to go through this and get the details soon, but that's the gist. Yeah. To Donald Trump, multiple.
Let's pause here, and I do want to pull up this video here. Let's go ahead and do that.
I think this is very important here because we want to be clear in what the Supreme Court weighed in on. The Supreme Court was taking up this central question about whether a lower court judge has the ability to block this part of the president's policy and his agenda. The Supreme Court was not weighing in on the particular question of whether the president's push to end birthright citizenship is constitutional. And so what the Supreme Court does decide here is that they do clear this path for the president to move forward with plans to try to end birthright citizenship in this country. And this does have broader implications here because we know this is just one of many issues that lower court district judges have weighed in on. They've weighed in on a series of things when it comes to immigration, not just birthright citizenship, also asylum cases. When we're talking about the federal government, some of the hiring freezes that we've seen here in Washington, D.C. as well. We've seen those lower court district judges block those as well. So from the administration perspective, the White House officials behind me, they're going to be looking at just how broad can this go? What are the larger implications? Well, some of those other rulings now have to be rolled back. And Diane, I will tell you, we're getting reaction in just now from the administration. We're actually hearing from Attorney General Pam Bondi for the first time. She says in a statement on social media, quote, "Today, the Supreme Court instructed district courts to stop the endless barrage of nationwide injunctions against President Trump." She goes on to compliment the lawyers, which she calls excellent, from the Justice Department. She says the Justice Department will continue to defend the president's policies so that he can implement them. And again, that's the basis of what we're talking about here. The administration firmly believes that lower court judges should not be able to weigh in and block the president's policies that he was elected on. And so going forward, this issue of whether or not birthright citizenship itself is constitutional, that could still make its way up to the Supreme Court. And during the oral arguments, we heard from some of the conservative justices on the bench. They did appear skeptical of that argument, asking a lot of questions on how exactly that would be implemented, Diane.
All right. And of course, there was commentary by Donald Trump himself as well. And I wanted to at least get that video set up for you guys so all of you can witness it firsthand. So here we go. President Donald Trump.
This is very.
President Donald Trump praises the Supreme Court for its actions. So let's go ahead and pull this up here.
Do you believe this ends the power of the lower court judges to stop your agenda? Do you see this as a full green light for your agenda going forward?
Well, you'd have to really speak to the lawyers about that. But this is really also a decision based on common sense. It didn't work the other way. It was a disaster where somebody from a certain location in a very liberal state or a liberal judge or a liberal group of judges could tie up a whole country for years because their decision would sometimes take years to overturn. We've overturned many of the decisions, but it would take years to do it. And we have to act quickly when it comes to illegal immigration. We have murderers, killers, we have drug dealers, we have what they've allowed to come into our country. It should never be forgotten. It should never be forgotten what they've done to our country. And we have to be able to act very quickly, and we're going to do that. Thank you.
Justice Amy Coney Barrett, sir, I know that you praised her and her opinion here in this case. She has taken some heat, though, from some of your supporters who have labeled her weak, squishy, a rattled law professor. What is your take on that?
I don't know about that. I just have great respect for her. I always have. And her decision was brilliantly written today from all accounts.
I also want to pull this up here as well.
Thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with numerous policies that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis. And some of the cases we're talking about would be ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore. That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation. This was, in fact, it was the same date, the exact same date, the end of the Civil War. It was meant for the babies of slaves, and it's so clean and so obvious. But this lets us go there and finally win that case, because hundreds of thousands of people are pouring into our country under birthright citizenship, and it wasn't meant for that reason. It was meant for the babies of slaves. So thanks to this decision, we can now properly file to proceed with these numerous policies and those that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis, including birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee resettlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries, and numerous other priorities of the American people.
So the big deal here is, and what's happening is that right now, Supreme Court today, breaking news, ruled Friday that the nationwide injunctions issued by the lower court judges likely exceed judicial branch's constitutional authority, handing a major boost to Trump to push to end birthright citizenship. So, we talked about, way early on in February when Trump was rounding up immigrants. And of course, what we saw earlier in the summer with what happened in LA, he's following through with his campaign promise. Not the best thing. Trump v. KSA INC revolved around the administration's challenge to the multiple lower courts sweeping injunctions against the president's day one order, overturning the longstanding constitutional protection. The Supreme Court did not address the merits of Trump's actual order in its opinion, only the extent to which one of the nearly 700 district judges in the U.S. could block an executive action from taking effect. So, going on. At the White House, Trump called the ruling a monumental victory for the Constitution and announced plans to advance the birthright citizenship order, as well as other policies that have been blocked by federal courts. Federal courts do not exercise general oversight of the executive branch. They resolve cases and controversies consistent with the authority Congress has given them. When a court concludes that the executive branch has acted unlawfully, the answer is not for the court to exceed its power to. The government's applications to partially stay the preliminary injunctions are granted, but only to the extent that the injunctions are broader than the necessary to provide complete relief to each plaintiff withstanding to sue. Nationwide injunctions have been frequently used by the lower courts to stop executive actions from applying across the board, rather than just granting relief to the plaintiffs who sued. Trump's actions have been subject to 25 injunctions between the start of his term in January and the end of April, more than any other president over the same time period, according to data from Congressional Research Service. The justices from across the ideological spectrum have raised concerns about lower courts overstepping their authority, but during oral arguments, the nation's top courts still struggled over how or whether to draw the line. Barrett wrote, universal injunctions lack a historic pedigree and were not authorized under 1789 Judiciary Act, but she and other conservative justices in the concurring opinion seemingly suggested that class action lawsuits are a viable tool that can be used against illegal presidential actions. Class action suits require lawyers to go through the same, more rigorous process to seek relief than for cases brought by individuals. So today has been nothing but a legal show for Hardlands Media. What a headache. Liberal Justice Santana Sotomayor penned the official dissent, which she read from the bench in a rare gesture of public disagreement with her colleagues, but it was concurring dissent with Justice Jackson that drew a rare rebuke from Barrett. Jackson had agreed with Sotomayor's dissent, but emphasized that Trump's administration's push to nix nationwide injunctions was effectively a request from his court's permission to engage in unlawful behavior. So, Trump going after birthright citizenship. Trump's order contradicts the 14th Amendment, which states that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. The amendment enacted after the Civil War initially applied to the children of freed slaves. Trump and his allies have argued that it should no longer apply to migrants who enter the U.S. while several months pregnant to ensure the children enjoy the privileges of citizenship, a practice known as birth tourism. 3 federal judges in Maryland, Massachusetts, and Washington state imposed sweeping injunctions, halting the order from taking effect in response to lawsuits from plaintiffs, including immigration groups and nearly 24 states. This case now with Trump is now the most high profile before the Supreme Court during his term, which is now wrapped up. The Supreme Court will convene in October 6th. So, 14th Amendment, folks. Let's see. Hold on. What we got here? Truck Fump. Seriously, William Charles. But he can also use that decision to deport anyone Anyone. Now, BW, right? It was intended for the descendants of the Atlantic slave trade. That way, they couldn't be sent back to Africa. Okay, Trump, sure, whatever you say. From Full Man TV. Yes, folks. Yes, the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment. Let's see. What else we have here? And yes, Herb Green, this is a long morning show, but I think the best way we could end this segment is, all right, Supreme Court gave Trump the green light. He's got it. He's got it. He's got it now. And you better believe he'll start implementing it. And from what we saw in February of this year and early in May and in June, with Trump rounding up migrants and everything else in between, you better believe that, the question of who's going to be kicked out of the country is going to get more intense. And in turn, knowing that there's a lack of humanity, because I have Heartlands Media, we covered the Gary Chicago International Airport way back in 2018, where nonviolent immigrants were being sent and being deported back to their home country. I just want to remind everyone that, a lot of these detention centers under Obama, under Trump, under Biden, now under Trump again, have a long track record of abuse, harassment, and people, poof, disappearing. I'm not saying anything's going to be going bad, but prepare for horror stories, the likes of which you don't want to hear. But Trump got what he wanted. He got what he wanted, and you better believe he's going to be running around the park screaming, I won, I won, I won.